My name's Alex, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Kingston to be exact. I never thought I'd see the day an alien stepped foot, or tentacle or whatever they have, onto Earth. It was surreal, like one of those bad movies where the CGI is so awful it looks intentional. The ship floated, defying all logic, and their lanky gray forms flickered onto the White House lawn. Our response was less than stellar. Half the troops panicked and fired first, probably some mix of adrenaline and abject terror. The other half froze, guns hanging uselessly. I'm not a hero, but I didn't raise a weapon or run. I've always been a stare danger in the eye type, or a morbidly curious and prone to shock type, as my shrink back home would argue. They seemed just as startled by the gunfire. Their leader, at least, the tallest one with the weird head ridges, held out a trembling appendage. A universal peace offering? Yeah, the universe sure has a twisted sense of humor. Negotiations went poorly. The translator malfunctioned halfway through, spitting out a string of gibberish that sounded vaguely like a Norwegian death metal song. One thing became clear. They wanted something from us. We wanted to know what the heck they were and why they parked their planet-sized saucer on the Rose Garden. Months stretched by. Politicians postured, scientists scrambled, and soldiers like me kept the line. Turns out, the aliens, the Xylari they called themselves, had no malicious intent. Resource-hungry, surprisingly chatty for a bunch of floating bioluminescent jellyfish things, but not hostile. Yet the whole situation had an edge to it, a tension that wouldn't fade. Like holding a lit match. You know it's unlikely to blow, but your gut twists with dread nonetheless. Turns out, my gut instinct was right. We thought the translator was the problem. Maybe, we reasoned, they just didn't get concepts like private property or please don't invade our airspace. But every new translator, every tweaked device, brought the same result. Stalled conversations and mounting frustration on both sides. Then came Lieutenant Henley, brainy kid, not much older than 20, fresh out of the academy. Henley was some kind of linguistic whiz, and thought the issue lay deeper than misplaced pronouns or verbs. He sat cross-legged in front of the Xylari negotiator, scribbling in a notebook. Not translations, sketches, doodles of stick figures and circles and weird little diagrams. Basic stuff, Henley said, shrugging as if downplaying his potential solution to intergalactic diplomacy. Nouns, actions, simple sequences, like teaching a toddler? Turns out the issue wasn't language, it was comprehension. Something fundamental. They were trying to teach us quantum physics, while we were still demonstrating the miracle of fire. Which brings us to the really weird part. Henley, after days of what can only be described as interspecies Pictionary, finally makes some headway. The Xylari, bless their floaty non-hearts, finally grok the idea we are not mental equals. It wasn't with malice, more like how you talk to a pet. You love the thing, but you're not planning college funds for it. They want to uplift us, Henley explained after a breakthrough session. The words hit the briefing room like a neutron bomb. Half the guys cheered, the other half hurled insults about galactic pets. I was part of the silent minority. Uplift, such a tidy word. It implied benevolence, generosity. It ignored the glaring gap between our species, the fact that we might never bridge it. The Xylari explained, and Henley translated via what could only be charades, their offer. They would share technology, knowledge, all in the name of advancing us into the galactic community. There was a catch, of course, one they assumed wouldn't matter. They don't sleep. Ever. Their brains, Henley explained with a kind of manic awe, were wired differently. Rest, as we know it, is a foreign concept. They could function, indefinitely, at peak capacity. For them, it was the most natural thing in the universe, like breathing is to us. The military minds lit up? Imagine soldiers that didn't need downtime, fleets ever vigilant, productivity through the roof. It wasn't just the military either. Scientists, engineers, artists, the potential for human advancement was staggering. But there were whispers, worried ones, in the barracks and medbays. We have a rhythm, built into our very bones. Day, night, work, rest. It's more than just biology, it's how we understand our world, our place in it. Sure, we've pulled all-nighters in college, powered through double shifts for a paycheck. But this was different. This was ripping out a pillar of what makes us. I volunteered for the first round of the treatment. We were lab rats, pioneers, heroes, depending on who you asked. They weren't forcing it on anyone, at least not yet. But the way the generals smiled, the glint in their eyes, that choice might not last long. I wasn't suicidal, not exactly. If anything, I was too damn stubborn to let something as fundamental as sleep be taken from me. They hooked me up to monitors, alien tech humming a low, unsettling tune. Henley gave me a weak thumbs up across the sterile room. It did little to reassure me. The lead Xylari scientist, a quivering mass of tendrils I secretly nicknamed Squidward, gestured toward the central table. A helmet-like device sat there, pulsing with an inner light that hurt my eyes. Squidward tapped the helmet, then mimed pulling it over his own head. I got the gist. No turning back, Henley mouthed. The universal sign of you got yourself into this. I gritted my teeth and lowered the helmet. It settled with a series of faint clicks, a cool tingle spreading through my scalp. Then, a hum building behind my ears. A sense of floating, of disconnection. Then, nothing. No blinding lights, no chorus of alien angels. I blinked, the world stubbornly remaining the same. Henley and Squidward both stared, their multifaceted eyes wide in what I could only assume was shock. It didn't take, Henley blurted out. Not the most profound analysis, but accurate. Squidward sputtered in his own language, tendrils flailing in agitation. He snatched the helmet away, muttering translated curses. Tests, prodding, more tests. It was like a doctor's visit from hell. At the end of the day, bleary-eyed and more confused than I'd walked in, they drew one conclusion. I was an anomaly, a biological oddity among my own kind. They tried with others. Some fell into comas their bodies couldn't escape. Others had their minds broken. Something in the Xylari process irrevocably shredded higher thought. Henley kept a list on the wall of his tiny room, numbers and tally marks. Those who succeeded, those who failed. The failed column was getting longer. They stopped the experiments after subject 27. The brass shut it down, fear rippling through their ranks now. What had initially seemed like a gift, a path to galactic brotherhood, now reeked of tampering with forces beyond our control. I became the most studied person on base, a biological riddle they couldn't crack, and frankly, a reminder of what they might have unleashed on us all. They started calling me the Sleeper. At first, it whispered through the ranks, a mix of awe and pity. I was an evolutionary throwback, a glitch in the pristine future the Xylari promised. Then, inevitably, the name made it up the chain of command. Generals uttered it with pursed lips, scientists with burning curiosity. I wasn't confined exactly. They needed me, my archaic brain that stubbornly clung to the rhythm of sleep. Henley, too, was caught in this strange limbo. He'd avoided the treatment, the success column on his list remaining defiantly blank. We were anomalies tethered together by circumstance, a linguist and a soldier turned relics. Life on base took on a surreal quality. Around me swirled a society edging closer to the Xylari ideal. Soldiers stood at attention for days on end. Engineers toiled over blueprints with eyes that never seemed to blink. There was an eerie sense of relentless progress, but also a hollowness, a missing piece I couldn't quite name. Laughter became scarce. The mess hall, once filled with grumbling and good-natured teasing, fell into a strained silence. Even the hotshots, the ones who initially clamored for the treatment, seemed off. Energy without release, ambition without the counterpoint of rest, led to a kind of jittery mania. The Xylari, for their part, were confused. Their gift, their path to interstellar harmony, was backfiring. Turns out, humans weren't so easily molded. We were messy, contradictory, stubbornly wired to this cycle of exertion and rest. They retreated, those bioluminescent jellyfish forms dimming in frustration. Negotiations stalled completely. Our requests for them to leave, to let us find our own way, were met with a dismissive flicker. Apparently the concept of buyer's remorse didn't translate across the galaxy. Henley fell into gloomy funks, pacing his cramped room and spewing theories. Evolution, neural pathways, the influence of Earth's rotation, any explanation for why some of us slipped through the Xylari's grasp. He'd stopped sleeping regularly, not out of some alien influence, but through sheer determination mixed with desperation. They're wrong. He'd rant, dark circles under his eyes. They're so obsessed with the how, the mechanics of the brain, they miss the why. Sleep isn't an error, it's the point. One night he dragged me out of bed and into his room. The list of names and tally marks had tripled, a morbid testament to a good intention gone horribly wrong. Henley shoved a tattered notebook at me, the pages covered in a frantic scrawl. Dreams, he said, his voice barely a whisper. That's what we lose. It seemed too simple, too poetic for something so catastrophic. But as he spoke, his wild eyes feverish, I felt a jolt of recognition. Dreams weren't just frivolous mental vacations. They processed emotions, sorted memories, sparked flashes of brilliance we dismissed as nonsense under the harsh fluorescence of waking life. To take that away? It was more than erasing rest. It was hacking at the root of our humanity. Suddenly, I was cold, a shiver starting deep in my bones. This wasn't a misstep, some well-meaning misunderstanding. The Xylari, with their dispassionate science and complete lack of need for dreams, hadn't just failed to understand us. They saw dreams as a weakness, a flaw to be ironed out. Henley and I took our theories to the top brass, the generals with their haunted eyes and sleepless grins that bordered on madness. Our pleas fell on deaf ears. Progress, they barked at us. Sacrifice, the needs of the many, blah blah blah. The same lines trotted out by power-hungry men since the dawn of time. They'd become puppets, mouthing the Xylari script, the price of this so-called advancement laid bare. It was an upgrade, yes, but with a cost far steeper than anyone initially imagined. We weren't being uplifted. We were being stripped down. I found myself missing the panicked gunfire of that first encounter, the chaos born of fear and the very human act of self-preservation. There was a kind of dignity in that gut-level resistance, a truth to our messy emotions that the Xylari never grasped. We made plans, Henley and I not grand world-saving ones, but acts of quiet defiance. I snuck into the labs, deleting data and sabotaging the alien equipment in petty, frustrating bursts. Henley spread rumors, rekindling the embers of fear. The Sleeper and the Linguist, an unlikely duo waging a silent war against impossible odds. The breaking point came when they announced the next phase: treatment for everyone, mandatory. It wasn't a suggestion anymore, but an order. They were done tiptoeing around human sensibilities. It felt less like galactic integration and more like colonization. That final night, a hazy twilight colored by the Xylari ship that never left, Henley and I stood on the barracks roof. Below, the soldiers stood in rigid formation, their faces slack and eerily serene. Run? Henley half joked, half hoped. I ran the scenarios in my head. We'd be hunted, branded as deserters. Our own people would turn on us, terrified of the consequences our simple existence posed. Besides, even if we escaped, where would we go? The whole planet was gearing up for the great sleepless leap forward. "We stay," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. It wasn't defeat that settled on me, but a different kind of resolve, cold and sharp. We went down not with surrender, but with two middle fingers held high, a final, obscene act of human defiance against the sanitized future they tried to force upon us. My last thought as they led us away, my eyes heavy with a tiredness that suddenly felt precious, was a simple one. Let them have their sleepless world. We would keep our dreams, and perhaps in those unguarded hours of the mind, find a way to fight back. They didn't try the treatment on us again. Maybe our defiance struck a nerve in the Xylari's complex web of tendrils, or perhaps their scientific curiosity flared at the unexpected resilience of our flawed biology. Regardless, Henley and I were relegated to a forgotten corner of the base, living ghosts among a society that had traded sleep for relentless efficiency. We existed in a strange limbo, prisoners in all but name, subject to the occasional bout of testing or prodding questions we learned to deflect. Yet there was a begrudging respect from the others, especially the ones who went through the treatment and came out altered. They'd look at us with a mix of envy and fear, their sleepless eyes lingering on the act of a simple yawn or the way our bodies slumped with exhaustion. Time warped? Days blurred into weeks, weeks into months. Even with the Xylari tech humming all around, the human need for routine eventually reasserted itself. The soldiers, once so rigid, fell into a pattern of bursts of intense activity followed by sudden crashes, their bodies desperately seeking a rhythm they no longer understood. Work happened in jittery spurts, brilliant breakthroughs followed by days of blank-eyed stupor. The Xylari were baffled. Their promise of endless productivity devolved into this chaotic dance of unsustainable energy. Henley and I exchanged grim smiles. Turns out, you can force a brain awake, but you can't trick the body for long. Then, a glimmer. Reports trickled in of resistance. Not organized or widespread, but small acts of rebellion. Snatches of song hummed at odd hours. Lullabies mothers would whisper to the children they might never see sleep again. Someone had scrawled a poem across a bathroom stall, messy and defiant. A stolen hour here and there, eyes fluttering shut in a pretended blink. The Xylari were too focused on the big picture to notice these flickers of resistance. But we saw them, felt them resonate with that stubbornly human part of us. Hope, always a fool's gamble, whispered that we weren't alone. The plot twist, the thing that shifted the balance, was so simple it bordered on ridiculous. Laughter? It started with Henley, a quiet chuckle at one of my sarcastic remarks. Then, full-blown, body-shaking laughter erupted at an incident involving a delirious, sleep-deprived scientist and a runaway donut. It was contagious. The sound, so foreign in this sterile, hyper-focused world, spread through the base. Soldiers, engineers, even the ever-composed Xylari paused, startled. Someone else laughed, then another. Soon, despite the exhaustion, despite the fear, the place echoed with laughter that verged on the hysterical. Sleep deprivation, it turns out, makes people a little crazy. Who knew? It was in that shared moment of absurdity, the base dissolving into a giggling mess, that we saw it. A flicker in the Xylari's bioluminescent forms, an uncertain ripple. For a species that prided itself on logic and control, on the endless march of progress, our chaotic display was baffling, incomprehensible, and perhaps subtly terrifying. The Xylari didn't understand laughter, not really. They didn't grasp its root in shared experiences, the absurdity of existence, the defiant joy wrung from difficult circumstances. They mistook our sleep-deprived mania for a system breakdown, a glitch in their careful reprogramming. Fear, unlike laughter, translates across any galactic barrier. They began to withdraw, their negotiations faltering, the promises of shared technology dwindling into excuses and vague warnings. Henley and I, relegated to that forgotten corner, became unlikely consultants. The generals, eyes bloodshot and desperate, pulled us into meetings. Why are they leaving? They demanded. We could only shrug, basking in a small, bitter victory. The Xylari ship, a constant in our sky, blinked out of existence a few weeks later. We barely celebrated. The damage was done. My friends, my comrades, were forever changed. their minds buzzing with a relentless hum. Henley was quieter, haunted by the names on his wall, casualties of a different sort. Yet the laughter didn't completely fade. It became a hushed thing, shared in the stolen moments of rest we clawed back. Dreams returned to some, fractured and strange, but dreams nonetheless. The fight wasn't about sleep alone. It was about reminding ourselves of the messy, illogical, utterly human things that made us worth saving. As for me, the sleeper, I became a symbol, a cautionary tale. Maybe somewhere in the vastness of space, the Xylari added a footnote to their galactic encyclopedia. When uplifting a species, take into account the importance of laughter and the inexplicable, precious need for sleep. Or better yet, find a species that appreciates a good nap and leave the rest of us alone. The base returned to a semblance of normalcy, or as normal as things could be in a world forever scarred by the Xylari's tampering. It turned out humanity was a stubborn weed, pushing back against the imposed order, finding ways to adapt. Henley, driven by guilt and a relentless curiosity, dedicated himself to studying those who underwent the treatment. He found ways to mitigate the damage, to quiet the constant buzz in their minds. It wasn't a cure, but offered a semblance of balance to those living on a relentless mental tightrope. I, on the other hand, was a ghost haunting my old life. The soldiers treated me with an odd reverence, the brass with thinly veiled suspicion. It seemed, despite saving them from the Xylari, my stubborn need for sleep made me a dangerous outlier, a reminder of the old ways they'd so readily abandoned. Nights, once a time of peaceful oblivion, became torture. Vivid dreams plagued me, remnants of the Xylari tech scrambling with human emotion. They weren't nightmares exactly, but filled with unsettling gaps, conversations with people I didn't recognize, landscapes that shifted and glowed with alien colors. In those dream spaces, I mourned a world that no longer existed, the simple rhythm of day and night lost to me, and possibly to humanity, forever. One morning, I awoke with a jolt, a name lingering on my lips. A name not my own? I went to Henley, scribbling it on a scrap of paper as his sleep-deprived eyes widened. "That's a name from the list," he whispered. "One of the failures." Failures. The word echoed in my head, a cruel reminder that those who succumbed to the treatment were not just altered, but lost. Yet this name, surfacing from the chaos of my dreams, felt like a lifeline. Henley ran the name through his database, cross-referencing known effects, the tiny, seemingly insignificant changes noted post-treatment. It was painstaking work, days that bled into sleepless nights. In the end, we uncovered a pattern, a subtle shift in brain activity, a frequency that resonated with the Xylari tech. They hadn't just tried to remove our need for sleep, they'd implanted a backdoor. My dreams weren't a glitch, they were a message. Imagine the scene, Henley, pale and wired, bursting into a meeting with the generals. He drops the evidence, the proof of this insidious manipulation, expecting outrage. Instead, he's met with blank stares. "Irrelevant," one of the generals grinds out, his sleepless eyes devoid of any human spark. They were too far gone, addicted to the endless focus, the power the Xylari tech offered. They'd already chosen sides. Word leaked, of course. Whispers of Xylari control, of sleeper agents planted among us. Yet the whispers were met not with resistance, but apathy, or worse, a flicker of interest. Fear had given way to a desperate ambition. If the Xylari wanted back in, the higher-ups reasoned, we'd bargain with our tainted soldiers as leverage. It was I who became the pariah. My dreams, the last bastion of untainted humanity, were dismissed as ravings. Henley, his warnings met with cold calculation, fell into a bitter silence. Then, they came for me, not with threats or accusations, but with an offer couched as concern. A special treatment, they claimed, meant to soothe my fractured mind, to ease the chaotic dreams. Underneath the platitudes, I heard the unspoken promise. They'd take my dreams too, leaving me as placid and focused as the rest. I ran. There was nowhere to hide on a planet teeming with minds wired awake, always watching. In their world, I was the glitch, the ticking time bomb reminding them of what they had sacrificed in the pursuit of power. In the end, I sought refuge in the forgotten places, crumbling cities where the buzz of human activity had quieted, pockets of resistance springing up amongst those who rejected the endless rush of the treatment. They were outcasts, branded as Luddites and terrorists. Yet, among the dust and the defiant graffiti, I found a strange solace. They hadn't succumbed to despair. In the quiet hours of stolen sleep, they'd made a chilling discovery. The Xylari implants responded not just to external signals, but to human emotion. Fear, anger, love. They amplified these feelings, twisting them into a weapon the Xylari could wield from afar. The sleepless soldiers, the generals locked in their sterile rooms, were primed for manipulation, their endless ambition easy to twist into blind obedience. It was an ugly war that followed, fought in whispered strategy sessions and midnight raids. Henley, fueled by guilt and the fading faces on his list, became a different kind of genius, learning to exploit the very tech that had broken so many. As for me, my dreams became the battleground. I learned to lucid dream, not with the whimsical control of internet gurus, but with a desperate intensity. In those shifting landscapes, I fought back. I turned the Xylari surveillance against them, flooding their channels with the raw chaos of human emotion, rage, sorrow, a love so fierce it burned through my dream body with a force I could barely comprehend. The Xylari never returned, at least not in starships. Yet the war for humanity wasn't fought on some distant battlefield, but in the hearts and minds of those they left behind. Some days, exhausted and trembling from dream battles, I would wonder if the old way, the way of sleep and laughter, was worth saving. And some nights, in a stolen hour of rest, I'd dream of sunlight and open fields, and find the strength to keep fighting. They call the forgotten cities dead zones now, places where sleep still reigns and dreams twist into weapons. I am neither hero nor villain in this new world, merely a survivor. Henley is out there somewhere, still tinkering with the Xylari tech, hoping to turn their own tools against them. Sometimes, late at night, I feel a flicker against the edge of my dreams, a signal buried in the static. Proof he hasn't given up. Proof that pockets of human resistance still endure. The fight isn't over, not by a long shot. The Xylari might be a galaxy away, but their influence lingers, a phantom hum under the relentless buzz of a sleepless world. Someday, they might find a way back, and if they do, we'll be ready. Maybe not with grand armies or gleaming tech, but with something far more potent: dreams, messy and defiant, and the enduring, exhausting, and utterly human will to fight for them.